This happened to me back in 2008 when I was 14, so my memory is a little fuzzy. My mom, brother, and I drove to deep in the sticks of Tennessee from Texas to visit. We were only staying for the weekend. My mom, aunt, and grandmother were talking, and I don't know how we got to this conversation, but my aunt was telling me how she heard about this abandoned church that was haunted. If you went to the church and took the stick that kept the door closed and put it somewhere else, when you came back it would be in its original place. There was a statue of an angel, and if you shined a light in its eyes at night, they would bleed. She was spending the night at a friend's house, and her friend also had another friend over that she wasn't familiar with. Her two friends decided to go out to this church at night early morning. It's pitch black because it's out in the country. They lay a Ouija board on the truck and start asking questions. Basically, some spirit named John said he was murdered by a gunshot in some year in the early 1800s. I swear in this town, there are more dead people than there are alive people. I don't actually know that, but it seems like it. The last question that they asked was, "Where are you?" The thing flew off the board. They decided they didn't want to look for it. Part of me wonders if it's still at the church and where it would be, so they checked the stones and found John. Then they thought that they heard a gunshot and ran back to the truck and went home. I said that I wanted to go to the church. She took me, my brother, and my cousin, who were the same age. It took us 45 minutes to drive out there, and the road that it was empty. Nothing but grass. There was no way you could walk there. Across the street was a field that went on for miles, and on either side of the church was just grass and trees. No street lights. I said that I wanted to go to the church. She took me, my brother, and my cousin, who were the same age. It took us 45 minutes to drive out there, and the road that it was empty. Nothing but grass. There was no way you could walk there. Across the street was a field that went on for miles, and on either side of the church was just grass and trees. No streetlights. So we get there, and it's a one-room white little church. It's surrounded by some trees towards the outside of the fence. The fence was black iron, and the opening was big enough for the trucks to come through. We saw that creepy angel statue. It looked like the Reaper. When we pull up, the gate is already open, and it's only open for one person to go through the gate. Immediately, my brother and my cousin, who were in the back seat, were like, "Oh no, we're not going in there." And my aunt was like, "Why is the gate open? I just don't understand why the gate is open." I had my hand on the handle. I looked at the gate, and I knew something was waiting for me on the other side of that gate. I could see, maybe my mind made it up, but I didn't see it with my physical eyes. A ghostly white dude with yellow crooked teeth, maliciously smiling at me, waiting for me to come in. I take my hand off the handle and say, "Okay, I'm ready to go home." She backed out and went down the road a little bit farther, and the closest thing next to us to turn around at, because there were little ditches on the side of the road, and in case it rains, was another graveyard. Not surprising. I'm telling y'all, there are more dead people in this town than alive people. We passed by the church, and I wasn't expecting her to stop, but she stopped to take a photo with a digital camera, and the door was open to the church. We all freaked out, and I swear I had this feeling like we needed to leave because I felt like something was going to chase after us. When we got home, the three of us couldn't stop looking at the camera of the church. The thing I remembered the most was that the treetops grew into a face. It looked like a bald old man with a crooked nose and long narrow chin. When my aunt got the picture developed, there were 4 orbs, one by the gate, one by the door, and 2 by the window. My brother and cousin swore they saw green eyes looking out the window. I didn't sleep that night. I felt like something was hovering over me, waiting for me to fall asleep. I kept praying that nothing would happen. I tried watching George Lopez to shake it off, but damn, there was no shaking it. I didn't sleep until I got back to Texas. That was my last night in Tennessee, and when I went back home, I slept with every light on every night for a while. And while we were there, I could feel just this unbelievable amount of hate from the demons that were there. They were so aggressive and ready to attack. It just pierced through you. And I walked away knowing that there is a God, and He is good. I don't know how I knew, but you know it when you come across something so evil. No human can conjure that kind of hate that crushes your soul. That's my only experience. I will never doubt that there is a spirit world after that. My aunt sent me the picture, but I tore it up back in 2012 because I was afraid that it would bring something bad into the house. For context, I live in a farmhouse on a plot of land that has been passed down through the family for 3 generations. The farm consists of a barn, a garage, and the refurbished house. The barn is 3 stories tall, with 1 main room and 2 small stalls on the side. Above the stalls is the loft/mow area. You have to take a ladder to get up there, but as a child I'd climb up the stall doors. One day, my brother and I were walking by the barn door to get to the wood pile when we heard a very faint sound of a train whistle. Confused, we went in the barn where the sound got louder. It sounded like the typical woot-woot of a train. It was coming from the mow. We climbed up and located the sound under a tall pile of old boards. Digging through, the sound got louder and louder. That's when we discovered a wooden crate full of old trains that my dad later explained belonged to my grandpa. He had died on the property and loved trains while he was alive. As soon as we went to take the cover off the crate, the sound stopped. We looked over the trains. They were from way before the small batteries existed, when you used to plug the set into a power source and the rails had little conductors that kept the train going. There was no way they could have come on without power. We weren't scared. We knew it was Grandpa coming to visit. It brought us both a warm and comforting feeling. Thanks for visiting, Grandpa. I read this story and it reminded me of my friend Jessica's old house. There was a taunting incident in it too. Also, I apologize in advance for the lengthiness of this. The house she grew up in and lived in with her parents until after her college days was haunted by an older man who had a bad temper and didn't like being messed with, as well as a little girl who loved to play and be a kid, but was also tormented by the male spirit. I'm not sure if she was his daughter or what, but I'll get to them later. I met Jessica when she was in high school and I was in middle school, but we didn't actually start hanging out and becoming good friends until after she graduated and I was about to graduate high school. We shared a mutual friend, and because of him, I met her, and the 3 of us were inseparable for quite a few years after that. The 2 of them ran a theater group in the small city we all grew up in, and after I graduated, I joined it and did a few plays with them. I'd actually first met her when I was in middle school because of theater. She was on the tech crew and I wanted to be, so I hung out with them during a play to see what all they did, and she was in charge of showing me things. It was because of the theater group she started that caused us to hang out at her house all the time, and since I was best friends with our mutual friend, whom she was also best friends with, I kind of became one of the main members of the group too, so we spent a lot of time rehearsing, talking about our next play, or designing sets. Spending all of that time there got her to open up about her ghosts, and her mom loved to tell me stories too. Apparently there were so many stories from over the years that her mom started writing them all down on a file on her computer, with aspirations to write a book about it all one day. Some of the things Jessica or her mom told me that happened there. During high school and her affiliation with the drama club and theater, a lot of people had been through her house, and a lot of them also got to hear the stories, so her house was well known for being haunted. During one cast party for one of the high school plays they did, a girl decided she didn't believe in the ghosts there and began taunting them. Jessica informed me that they had discovered that to be a bad move years prior, so she tried talking the girl out of it. But the girl continued to walk through the house talking trash to the ghosts. In one of the spare bedrooms that had been converted to a multi-purpose room on the first floor was a sewing machine. While in the room talking trash, the sewing machine began running, scaring the hell out of the two of them. What scared them more was when Jessica went to unplug it to get it to stop running, and discovered that it was already unplugged. The girl froze, turned pale white, and fled the house, never to return. Quite a few people witnessed this. I feel like the most activity happened to Jessica, and I think that's because she let it all get to her. Her dad didn't bother with any of it at all, and for all I know didn't even believe in it. Her mom loved it, and as I said, documented everything. She would tell me stories with a smile on her face, but Jessica was terrified of what went on, so I think that's why she was messed with all the time. That, and her bedroom was upstairs. It was the top floor of the house, what may have been an attic. Maybe it was meant to be a room. It was finished and had its own bathroom, and honestly, it could have been 2 big bedrooms, but the entire floor was wide open. Jessica said she would lay in her bed almost every night and hear footsteps all over on her floor, walking around her bed, sometimes running back and forth. She would feel someone or something sit on the edge of her bed, but she would cower under the blankets and hope it went away. She actually developed a sleep habit where nothing could wake her. I guess she was just so scared of what she might see if she did wake up. I have stories of all 3 of us hanging out late into the night and trying to wake her up when it was time to go. Once we laid her on our car hood and blew the horn for a solid minute, she wouldn't wake up. She also had a habit of sleep texting people nonsense messages. Those were always fun. Both her and her mom told me a few times how they would all be downstairs during the day and hear someone running around above them when clearly nobody was up there. The running always sounded like a kid's feet, not an adult stomping around. One day I went over, as we had planned on hanging out that day. I can't remember what we were doing, probably just driving around, but when I went into her house to get her, she was busy looking around for her purse. Her and I were the only ones in the house. Both of her parents were at work. She looked back and forth, every room. The whole time I stood by the front door waiting and watching her look. She told me she had looked in her room upstairs and everywhere else, and that she had just got home from her classes at college a short while before I stopped over, and she had her purse with her then. She knew she brought it in, and had doubts that she had even taken it upstairs. She stopped in front of the bottom of her stairs while walking from the kitchen towards me in the living room, which was supposed to have a door, but it had been removed years before to make the upstairs feel less closed in. While I was watching her stand there and think about where her purse could be, it flew down the stairs, hit her in the chest, and fell to the floor. The look on her face was priceless, as she slowly looked back up the steps towards her room, pale as pale could be. I couldn't help it. I laughed. She quickly picked up her purse and shoved me out the door. We didn't return until much later when she knew her parents would be home. Despite me experiencing that firsthand, I still think the best story of the home happened to Jessica alone, as she was the only one there. I talked to her immediately after it happened, and no, she wasn't lying about it. She came home from her college. Her parents were away at work, and she went in to use the bathroom. She said while she was using the facilities, all of a sudden there was crying in the house, like a little girl upset about something. She said it grew in volume until it was coming from right on the other side of the bathroom door. Jessica freaked out and was afraid to leave the bathroom, but the crying wouldn't stop. Jessica, not thinking to ask if everything was okay or what was wrong, if I remember correctly, yelled to go away, but the crying continued. She finally got the nerve to leave and open the door, the crying never stopping. She ran from the bathroom to the kitchen and said the crying followed her. She quickly wrote a note to her parents about what was going on and why she was leaving, and she ran out of the house, the crying following her until she was gone. So, one night the cast of the current play she was doing with her group was at her house all day and into the night working on set pieces in the yard. About the time that everyone decided to leave, just myself, Jessica, and one of the cast members hung around. We cleaned up and went inside to have a seat in the living room. I'm not sure where her parents were, but we were the only three in the house. For whatever reason, we had been talking about ghosts, and her house specifically. I think it was because the cast member with us believed in ghosts, and I pushed Jessica to tell the cast member about her house. One of the things people experience there all the time was being spoken to when nobody else in the house could hear it. A lot of people had that happen to them, and as Jessica told us about how she would be in her room and hear her mom yell to her from the kitchen, only for her to go to the kitchen and ask what she wanted, to find out her mom never called to her. The other cast member said he heard a bang in the house that neither of us heard, and he said he only heard it with one ear. So, I decided to taunt the ghosts myself. Since they responded to that sort of thing, I was ready. I started talking crap loudly, calling them out, and then it happened. Another loud bang, this time from the kitchen. We all heard it. I jumped up and ran to the kitchen to look around, and the only thing I could figure that made that noise was the empty glass on the kitchen table. The bang we had heard sounded like it could have been that, but who slammed it down on the table? I walked into the center of the kitchen, and that's where I felt the spirits. The feeling was intense, and to this day the most intense I have ever felt from a ghost. The longer I stood there, the more electrically charged my body felt. I got a strong image in my head of who was standing there with me. It was the older man and the little girl. They were standing side by side, and he had his arm around the back of her head with his hand on her shoulder. I'm 5'10", but the man was easily 6 feet, and at the top of the little girl's head only went up to his waist. He had short brown hair and was clean shaven, and wore blue jeans and a red flannel shirt. She, on the other hand, had long black straight hair and wore a white nightgown. He appeared pissed, and I think his energy is what I was feeling mostly. She seemed scared, and I kind of got the vibe from them that maybe she wasn't his daughter, and that maybe he abused her in some way when they were living, or maybe he kidnapped her. I don't know. Maybe they didn't meet until the afterlife. I certainly hope they didn't die together. I also got the feeling that he was controlling, even in death, and that the little girl was scared of him. The energy was so strong that I had to leave it, or I would have passed out. I was just able to leave the kitchen on my own, and felt as if I had been floating away. I couldn't feel myself walking, but I know I was, because I was moving back to the living room. I saw everything through tunnel vision, and I was super excited that I had just had that experience. The energy I felt from them. Wow. Jessica said I was also pale white and looked like I was going to pass out. I remember talking to her and the cast member. I can't remember his name now, but what had just happened, and we all had to go outside so I could come back down to earth and tell them everything. Shortly after that, things got so bad there that they had a priest come in and bless the house. Jessica was pissed because she still heard the running around upstairs after the blessing, and I had her tell me again what the priest had done during the blessing. He rid the home of the evil spirits. It must have worked, because he got rid of the man that had been there, but the little girl wasn't evil, and she was still there, except she was happy, and played all the time, which was bad for my friend because she had to hear her running around a lot more. They moved out a few years after that, and their new home isn't haunted, I don't think. She's never told me if it is. Maybe I'll reach out to ask her about the book. I also found out something a short while after the blessing. Jessica's aunt and her large family lived just a few streets down in a house that looked just like hers. Most of those houses do, as they were all built at the same time. Their house is also haunted. I say is because they still live there and still experience things. And Jessica's cousin, one day shortly after the blessing of Jessica's house, said she saw a ghost in her house and described the man I saw in the kitchen to a T. Jessica couldn't believe it, as her cousin hadn't heard about my experience in the kitchen yet. Apparently when he left Jessica's house, he somehow ended up there. For all I know, he's still there.